EFF leader Julius Malema says his party will end load shedding within 6 months of entering the union buildings. Malema was speaking at his party's manifesto launch at Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban. He addressed thousands of supporters, of course, to put forward the EFF's vision for the next 5 years should they be elected into power. We will be now expanding on this with our guest, the political analyst, Professor Sethulego Matebesi. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. As we watched EFF leader Julius Malema addressing the thousands of supporters, putting forward the EFF's vision for the next 5 years, should he be elected into power, did he put forward a compelling enough case showcasing why his party deserves to govern KwaZulu-Natal?
Hi, good morning, Mpho, and good morning to the viewers. A compelling case indeed, because if you look at Malema as somebody who can deliver a speech which some of us would say perhaps it does rings a bell or strikes a chord with his target market. But very briefly also, you should know that we're talking about a province where the party got less than 2% in 2014 and a significant proportion of the voters in 2019, almost 14%. And that in itself tells you that there is huge potential for the party to grow in that particular province.
So with that potential, looking at the EFF's performance when it comes to by-elections and, of course, the impact of that insofar as the way forward is concerned when it comes to elections being around the corner, and then the other impact of the Umkhonto weSizwe party, the emergence of the party, how much of a threat does that put into play for the EFF in KZN?
No, not necessarily, because we're talking about a party that has nothing to lose. In fact, what the party did yesterday was to turbocharge its vision to try and unseat the ANC, which I think for me, for now, it's still a far-fetched dream. But I strongly believe that parties like MK and your ACT will take away supporters from the African National Congress and maybe in the NFP in KwaZulu-Natal. So for the EFF, I can't see that they will now lose electoral support. Instead, they stand a chance to slightly gain support there. But it's got to be very interesting. The presence of MK will definitely disrupt. And people should understand it's not only about the number of voters who will go out, but it's the damage that such parties can cause in terms of causing confusion. And ultimately, where people might just decide that, look, I am now lost, I don't really know what to do, and then it will affect the voter turnout. And I think any low voter turnout will hurt the ruling party instead of parties like the EFF.
Yeah. As we speak, the country's grappling with stage 6 load shedding. In fact, it comes right after President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address, where he said the worst is behind us. We heard EFF leader Julius Malema making some bold promises around electricity, saying that Eskom's privatization, working with China to restore South Africa's coal power stations and getting the Russians to help build a nuclear power plant, and, of course, detailing how, should his party be in power, the load shedding factor will be a thing of the past in 6 months. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, you know, it's possible for any opposition parties to make these bold statements about, ending load shedding in 6 months. But I strongly believe that load shedding has been man-made, and yes, with proper planning, it can be undone, because I strongly believe that actually it also has to do with lack of planning. And it's unacceptable that we're sitting with this particular situation. But fact of the matter is, I strongly believe that the EFF is presenting a skewed reality, a vision of reality, because the question is, how are they going to achieve that in 6 months? You will need, because sometimes if it's a man-made problem, You now need to go into Eskom and convince people to say you've got a responsibility, a national responsibility to work for your country. And I think to try and do that will take a couple of months and even years to do, because people are so used to, rock up at work and just sing around and even sabotage and all this. I don't even want to go into all the other factors, let alone the technological intervention that will be needed, the financial intervention, the resources that will be needed. So that can take some time. But it's a bold statement, which I think is very commendable, but unfortunately it presents, it cultivates an image that I don't think it's a reality of South Africa today.
Talking about image, what we did see, in fact, a lot of reaction on social media, is how the EFF provided sanitary towels at the manifesto launch yesterday. A lot of people coming out to say that it was perhaps a sign of privilege and not the right platform to do so. What do you make of that?
No, for me it's commendable. The EFF is a public organization, and we all know, and this is where I think sometimes perhaps we get it wrong, where the ANC has been blamed for handing out food parcels and all that. So for them, perhaps there was a reason why they would want to do that. Remember, if you go around from door to door in certain areas, it becomes very difficult. You will not reach all your supporters. You may even hand out this stuff to people who are not necessarily sympathetic or identify with the ideology of the EFF. And I believe they thought that perhaps it's the best way to try and hand that out to their supporters at the stadium.
In a bold statement, Malema said that an EFF government would expropriate 50% of land from white people before the end of next year, and it'll give it back to its rightful owners, being Africans. How relevant is the land matter with the EFF as we go to elections?
No, I don't think the issue of the land, it's an issue that we should only say it's an EFF issue. I mean, you go through South Africa, any major city, and just look at schools in your predominantly white towns, or previously white towns. It is shocking. Some of these school grounds or areas, will cover even half of our townships. And if you look at the facilities and all that, land is important, and it's even more pertinent in a continent like Africa. A man or a woman who owns land, it's completely different than a landless man. And I strongly believe that this is an issue not for only the EFF, and the EFF will be commended for that. Although I strongly believe perhaps the approach is wrong, because you need to navigate around this very sensitive issue in a way that it will not flare up racial tensions. But the question is, some other people who are listening to this will say, but do we want to dictate how this whole issue of land redistribution or expropriation should be dealt with? But the fact of the matter is, we are a country which has been bleeding in terms of racial tension, and we should navigate around this in a very cautious manner.
As you take a look at the different parties, I mean, you touched a little bit on the emergence of Umkhonto weSizwe, as well as the IFP without its former leader, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, as well as the ANC and the EFF and the DA, all fighting for a piece of the pie in KwaZulu-Natal. What are some of the obstacles and the loopholes that these parties will encounter?
Yeah, well, if you look at what is currently happening in KwaZulu-Natal in terms of these disasters, almost on an annual basis, it seems as if people find themselves on a back foot. But also the popularity of the former president with MK, and as I've already alluded to the fact that the damage that confusion can cause amongst the electorate. But I strongly believe that for the ANC, ANC, which has openly, in the past I've stated that, it would have been very difficult for the provincial executive committee of the ANC to make a pronouncement about the decision that the former president has made. But they come out guns blazing to say it is fine, the president can do that, but then they don't want him to still be aligned to the ANC. I think those are bold statements, and unfortunately what the former president is doing is putting tremendous pressure on this young leadership of the KZN leadership of the African National Congress. But for other opposition parties, like the DA and those who have formed the so-called PAC, they will need to convince the electorate that they are a viable alternative to the ANC. And I think that is going to be very difficult. And I strongly believe that perhaps the EFF stand a chance of convincing the KZN electorate or making inroads there, although very, not so much significantly, but I strongly believe that they do stand a chance of growing in KwaZulu-Natal.
Professor, we heard the IEC last week speaking about their expectations as they gave us some account of the second voter registration drive, saying that they expect the youth to drive higher voter turnout insofar as the numbers are concerned. You spoke right at the start of our discussion about the target market of the EFF. Who exactly is the EFF speaking and relating to? I mean, yesterday we saw quite a high number of young people who really just wanted to hear what Malema had to say and, of course, hoping for some change.
Yeah, well, just to start off, if you look at the 2019 outcome of the elections, I mean, the ANC 54%, EFF 14%, IFP 16%, and the DA 13%. You can clearly see that the IFP, which I strongly believe that the KZN is their stronghold, they should be within the 25th, at least get a quota of the votes in that province. And they haven't done that. So we know what the EFF stands for. We know the 7 cardinal points of the EFF, like, the nationalization of mines and all that. But we also know that the EFF strikes a chord or rings a bell for young people in your informal settlements and all that. But what we have also found, what history has also shown us, is that filling up stadiums does not necessarily translate into those people actually voting for that party. And I think if the EFF can try to navigate around this challenge, they will be good to go. But you also need active foot soldiers. We have seen in various parts of South Africa, 1 or 2 people wearing the shirts of the EFF and all. But when it comes to elections, those people are found wanting, because you need foot soldiers who will actively campaign for the party. And if they can get that right, and with low levels of intimidation in KwaZulu-Natal, I strongly believe that they do stand a chance. But it will definitely need a much more concerted effort than, filling up stadiums and making door-to-door campaigns.
Yeah. Very well. Thank you so much, Professor Sethulego Matebesi, giving us a sense of how the EFF fared as that election manifesto launch was delivered by EFF leader Julius Malema. Political analyst Professor Sethulego Matebesi.